The crystal champagne flute feels impossibly cold in my hand. The bubbles rise in a frantic, silent scream, and I feel a strange kinship with them. The room is a low hum of polite conversation, the clinking of glasses, and a string quartet playing something vaguely celebratory in the corner. It's our 10th anniversary party. Our home is filled with flowers that smell like a funeral and friends who look at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They all know. Or they think they know. Mark, my husband, stands by the fireplace holding court. He's laughing, a deep, confident sound that used to make my stomach flutter. Now it just makes it churn. He catches my eye from across the room and gives me a little wink, a conspiratorial gesture meant to say, "Look at us. So modern. So evolved." He thinks this is his victory lap. He thinks I am the sad, compliant wife, trailing in his magnificent, progressive wake. He has no idea that the ground beneath his feet is about to crumble into a sinkhole. He has no idea that I am not the victim in this story. I am the architect of his ruin. The doorbell chimes, a sharp, clean sound that cuts through the noise. Every head turns. Mark's smile tightens just a fraction. He told me not to. He begged me, actually, in a tone that was half command and half plea. "Don't embarrass me, Chloe." Not tonight. He assumes I've brought some random, pathetic date to prove a point. A yoga instructor. A barista. Someone to make him feel a fleeting, manageable pang of jealousy. I walk toward the door, my heels clicking a steady, deliberate rhythm on the hardwood floor. The entire party holds its breath. I can feel their eyes on my back, a physical weight. I pull the heavy oak door open. And there he is. David. Tall, impeccably dressed, with kind eyes that hold a hint of steel. He smiles at me, a genuine, respectful smile. "Chloe," he says, his voice calm and steady. "You're ready." I step aside to let him in. David. Mark's boss. The man who holds Mark's entire career, his entire future, in the palm of his hand. I take David's arm, and together, we turn to face the room. I watch the sequence of emotions play across my husband's face. Confusion, like a computer trying to process faulty code. Annoyance, a flicker of his usual patriarchal frustration. And then, as David nods a polite, almost formal greeting in his direction, the dawning, gut-wrenching horror. It's a beautiful thing to watch. His face goes slack. The champagne glass slips from his fingers, shattering on the stone hearth, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, deafening silence. And then he screams. It's not a word. It's a raw, animal sound of pure, unadulterated panic. The sound of a man who just realized he wasn't holding a loaded gun at his wife's head. He was holding it to his own. If you've ever felt the ground shift so completely beneath your feet, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story is already speaking to you, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know to bring these moments to life. Just 6 months ago, this silence, this scream, was unimaginable. 6 months ago, my life was beige. It wasn't a bad life. It was comfortable, predictable. Mark and I had been together for 10 years, married for 8. We had the house in the suburbs with the slate gray siding and the perfectly manicured lawn that Mark was so proud of. We had the matching SUVs and the joint bank account. From the outside, we were the picture of success. The couple everyone wanted to be. I remember thinking our love was like a well-worn armchair. It wasn't thrilling anymore, not like in the beginning, but it was familiar. It was safe. You knew its shape, the way it would hold you. I'd met Mark in my last year of college. I was an art history major with dreams of curating a gallery, of finding lost masterpieces in dusty attics. He was in business school, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. He was a force of nature. He didn't just walk into a room, he conquered it.
And he wanted me.
It was intoxicating. He loved my bohemian spirit, he said. He loved that I saw the world in colors and shapes he couldn't comprehend. But slowly, subtly, his love began to feel more like ownership. My dreams of curating became a cute hobby. My freelance work writing for art journals was something to keep me busy. His career, however, was the sun around which our entire universe orbulated. I became his support system, his sounding board, his unpaid, uncredited social secretary. I planned the dinner parties that charmed his clients. I remembered the names of their children and their favorite brand of scotch. I built the foundation of our social life, the very life that propped up his professional one, brick by painstaking brick. And I told myself I was happy. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. You sacrifice. You compromise. You find your joy in their joy. Our 10th anniversary was approaching, and I was planning a quiet getaway. Just the two of us. A cabin in the mountains, a fireplace, no cell service. I wanted to reconnect, to find that spark that had been buried under years of routine and his relentless ambition. I imagined us talking, really talking, for the first time in years. I imagined holding his hand and feeling that old, familiar jolt. I was naive. I was a fool. I was living in a past that no longer existed. The life I thought was a comfortable armchair was actually a carefully constructed cage, and I hadn't even realized I was in it. The walls were painted in shades of contentment. The bars were wrapped in the velvet of security. But it was a cage all the same. And my husband, the man I had given my life to, was about to hand me the key, thinking it would be the thing that finally broke me. The conversation happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were our day. No late meetings for him, no social obligations for me. We'd order Thai food and watch a movie. It was a small ritual, one of the last remaining threads of the us I was so desperately trying to hold on to. I was setting the table, the scent of Penang curry filling the kitchen. I was talking about the cabin, about a hiking trail I'd found online. Mark was unusually quiet, staring at his phone. He wasn't scrolling, just staring. "Chloe," he said, his voice flat. He didn't look up. "We need to talk." My blood ran cold. Those 4 words are a death knell. They are the sound of the axe just before it falls. I put the forks down, my hand trembling slightly. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were different. They weren't angry or sad. They were clinical, like a doctor about to deliver a difficult diagnosis he has no emotional investment in. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, the classic opening line of a man who has already made a decision and is now just figuring out how to sell it. "About us. About our marriage." He talked for what felt like an eternity. He used words like evolution, stagnation, and personal growth. He spoke of a book he'd read, an article he'd seen. He constructed a careful, intellectual argument, a beautiful cage of words. And then he got to the point. "I think we should open our marriage," he said. The words hung in the air between us, thick and poisonous, smelling of betrayal. The curry grew cold on the counter. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. I stared at him, trying to connect this man, this stranger with the cold, dead eyes, to the boy who once traced my name on a foggy car window. "You want to sleep with other people?" I asked, the words feeling clumsy and foreign in my mouth. He winced, as if I'd said something vulgar. "It's not just about sex, Chloe. It's about freedom. It's about experiencing new things, new people, so we can bring that energy back into our marriage. It will make us stronger." He was trying to frame it as a gift. "A gift for me. You've been so focused on me, on this house," he said, his voice softening into a patronizing coo. "You've lost a part of yourself. This will help you find it again. It will be an adventure, an adventure." He was offering me an adventure, while all I wanted was the safety of his arms. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He had spent a decade systematically dismantling my independence, encouraging me to fold my life into his, and now he was accusing me of being too dependent. He was the one who had built the cage, and now he was criticizing me for living in it. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a proposal. It was a permission slip. He had already met someone. Or he had a list of someones he wanted to meet. This wasn't about us, this was about him. He wanted to cheat, but he wanted to do it without the inconvenience of guilt. He wanted a free pass, and he wanted me to stamp it for him. "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt like a boulder in the room. "Absolutely not." His face hardened. The mask of the enlightened, modern husband fell away, and I saw the petulant, selfish man underneath. "Don't be so close-minded, Chloe," he snapped. "It's the 21st century. People do this. It's healthy." The fight lasted for hours. It bled into the next day and the day after that. My refusal was, in his eyes, a personal failing. I was insecure. I was jealous. I was old-fashioned. I was trying to hold him back. He was a master of twisting reality, of turning my pain into a character flaw. The house, our home, became a battleground. The air grew thick with unspoken resentments. Every meal was silent. Every night was spent on opposite sides of a king-sized bed that felt like a vast, frozen tundra. I was living with a ghost who looked like my husband. I tried to fight it. I tried to save us. In those first few weeks, I was a flurry of desperate activity. I was like a medic trying to perform CPR on a corpse. I suggested counseling. He laughed. "What's a therapist going to tell us, Chloe? To communicate more? We're communicating right now." He saw therapy not as a tool for healing, but as a challenge to his intellectual superiority. He was already evolved. What could a therapist possibly teach him? I booked the cabin in the mountains anyway, a non-refundable act of pathetic optimism. I sent him the link, a picture of a cozy room with a stone fireplace and a view of snow-dusted pines. "We can get away from all this," I texted him. Just as his reply came hours later. "Can't. Have a work thing, a work thing." That became his new mantra. The two words that covered a universe of lies. I tried to be the wife he'd fallen in love with. I wore the dress he liked. I cooked his favorite meal, a complicated beef bourguignon that took all day. I lit candles. I put on the music from our wedding. I was trying to remind him of what he was throwing away. He walked in, saw the elaborate setup, and sighed, a long, weary sound of pure irritation. "Chloe, what is all this? We're not in a movie." He ate in front of the TV, scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that my heart was breaking right across the table from him. The loneliness was a physical presence. It was a cold weight in my chest, a constant ringing in my ears. I would wander through the rooms of our beautiful, empty house, touching the objects that made up our life together. The photo from our honeymoon in Italy, the lumpy clay pot I'd made in a ceramics class he'd encouraged me to take. They felt like artifacts from another life, relics of a civilization that had already collapsed. He started going out more. On Tuesday nights. On Friday nights. He'd come home late, smelling of unfamiliar perfume and expensive whiskey. He'd be humming, a little bounce in his step. He was radiant with the glow of his newfound freedom. He never gave details. It was part of the rules he'd unilaterally decided on. "Don't ask, don't tell," he'd said cheerfully. It's cleaner that way, cleaner for him. For me, it was torture. My mind became my own personal hell. Every time his phone buzzed, I imagined a text from another woman. Every late night at the office was a date. I started losing weight. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake in our bed, listening for the sound of his car in the driveway, my stomach in a tight, acid-filled knot. I was turning into a ghost in my own life. I felt invisible. One afternoon, I was cleaning out his closet, a futile attempt to impose some order on the chaos of my life, and I found a receipt. It was tucked into the pocket of a jacket he'd worn the previous night. A receipt from a ridiculously expensive restaurant downtown. A table for two. The date was from the night he was supposedly at a work dinner. The total was astronomical. There were 2 lobster entrees and a bottle of champagne that cost more than our first couch. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the champagne. Champagne was our drink. We had it on our first date. At our wedding. On every anniversary. It was special. It was ours. And he had shared it with someone else. I sank to the floor of the closet, surrounded by the scent of him. The receipt crumpled in my fist, and I finally let myself sob. It was a raw, ugly sound. The sound of something breaking for good. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing my past. He was taking our shared memories, our private rituals, and rewriting them with a stranger. He wasn't just building a new future. He was burning our history to the ground. The challenges kept mounting. each one a stone added to the wall he was building between us. His freedom was becoming expensive. I handle our finances. I always have. It was another one of those tasks that fell to me, the responsible one, while he chased the big, shiny ideas. And I started to notice things. Strange charges on the credit card. Cash withdrawals from ATMs near boutique hotels I knew for a fact were nowhere near his office. A subscription to a high-end dating app that promised discreet connections for discerning individuals. It was a slow, steady bleed. He was funding his new life with our shared money, the money I had carefully managed, the money we were saving for a future that I now realized only I believed in. When I confronted him, he was indignant. "It's my money, Chloe. I earn it. It's our money, Mark," I'd say, my voice shaking with a rage I was struggling to contain. "We're a partnership," he would just laugh. "You're the one who wanted a traditional marriage. Well, this is it. The man earns the money. He gets to decide how to spend it." He threw my own perceived values back in my face, twisting them into a weapon.
He was an expert at that.
The gaslighting became an art form. Every valid concern I had was reframed as a symptom of my own neurosis. I was paranoid. I was controlling. I was obsessed with money. He made me feel like I was going crazy, like I was the one with the problem. Our friends started to pull away. It was subtle at first. The invitations to dinner parties dwindled. The casual text messages stopped. I could feel their discomfort.
They didn't know what to say.
Mark would drag me to social events, and it was excruciating. He would be charming and gregarious, the life of the party, while I stood by his side, a silent, smiling prop. He'd make jokes about his hall pass, winking at the other husbands, who would laugh uncomfortably. The wives would look at me with a horrible, suffocating pity. They saw a doormat, a woman who had lost control of her husband and her life. And the worst part was I was starting to believe them. I felt weak, pathetic. I had built my identity around being Mark's wife, and now that foundation was gone, and I didn't know who I was without it. He was poisoning the well, not just at home, but in our entire social circle. He was painting a narrative where he was the enlightened explorer, and I was the nagging, insecure ball and chain. And people were buying it because Mark was just that convincing. His confidence was a tidal wave that swept away all doubt. The man I loved had become my tormentor, and he was doing it with a smile on his face, convincing everyone, including for a time me, that the poison he was feeding me was actually medicine. The shift happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. It wasn't a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, cold click. The sound of a final gear locking into place. I was paying bills online, staring at the screen, the numbers blurring through a film of unshed tears. Another hotel charge. This one was from a place nearby, a boutique hotel with a notoriously romantic rooftop bar. The charge was from the previous night. A night he was, once again, closing a big deal at the office. I felt the familiar wave of sickness and despair wash over me. I was about to close the laptop, to go lie down and let the misery consume me, as I had so many times before. But then something stopped me. A flicker of something other than sadness. It was anger. A cold, clear, diamond-hard anger. I was done crying. I was done being the victim. I was done mourning a marriage that was already dead. The man I had married was gone. In his place was a liar, a narcissist, and a coward. And you don't mourn a monster. You hunt it. I opened a new browser window. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't just looking at our finances anymore. I was digging. I had his passwords. He'd given them to me years ago. In case of emergency, he'd said, never imagining I would use them against him. It was a staggering display of arrogance. He never even bothered to change them. He didn't see me as a threat. He saw me as an accessory. I went through his emails, his social media, his cloud storage. It was a digital archaeological dig into the ruins of our marriage. And I found it. A folder, cleverly mislabeled Q3 projections. Inside wasn't spreadsheets and market analysis. It was photos. Dozens of them. Him and a woman. Her name was Amelia. She was younger, a junior associate at his firm. The photos were from dates, from weekends away I never knew about. There they were, smiling at a vineyard in Napa the same weekend he told me he was at a tech conference in Austin. There they were, kissing under the Eiffel Tower on a work trip to Paris I had helped him pack for. And there it was. The final, damning piece. A video. It was short, obviously filmed on a phone. It was Mark talking to someone, a friend maybe, his back mostly to the camera. He was laughing, a bottle of beer in his hand. Chloe? Yeah, she finally agreed to the open marriage thing, he was saying, his voice dripping with condescension. Took her a while. She's so traditional. But honestly, it's perfect. I get to have my fun with Amelia, and I don't have to deal with the drama of a divorce. She keeps the house running, handles all the boring life admin stuff. Why would I ever leave? I've got the perfect setup. Life admin stuff. That's what I was. That's what our life, our home, our decade together had been reduced to. I wasn't his partner. I was his housekeeper, his administrator, an inconvenient piece of emotional furniture he had to occasionally manage. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat there in the silence of my office, the rain pattering against the window, and I felt a profound, terrifying calm descend upon me. The grief was gone, burned away by the white-hot fury that now took its place. He thought he had the perfect setup. He thought he was so clever. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten who I was before I became his wife. He had forgotten about the mind that loved puzzles, the spirit that loved strategy, the woman who could see the world in colors and shapes he couldn't comprehend. He was about to get a reminder. The game had changed. He thought he was the only one playing, but I was about to write a new set of rules. And in my version of the game, I was the one who was going to win. The next day, I made him breakfast. Omelets, his favorite, with goat cheese and chives. I poured his coffee. I smiled. It was the most difficult performance of my life. You were right, I said, my voice sweet and even. I've been so close-minded. I was scared, but I've been doing some thinking and I want to try. I want to embrace this. Mark's face lit up. It was like watching the sun rise on his smug, self-satisfied face. He looked relieved, triumphant. He had won. He had broken me down and remolded me into the cool, modern wife he wanted. Chloe, that's amazing, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin, but I didn't pull away. I squeezed his hand back. I knew you'd come around. This is going to be so good for us. We spent the next hour laying out the rules. It was his list, of course. Don't ask, don't tell. No falling in love. No bringing anyone to our home. Be safe. He recited them like a corporate mission statement. I agreed to everything. I nodded. I smiled. I was the very picture of compliance. I have one rule, though, I said, keeping my tone light, casual. He looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. Okay. No one from work, I said. It's just messy. If things go wrong, it could affect your career. I don't want that for you. It was the perfect bait. I was framing it as a concern for him, for his precious career. I was protecting him.
His shoulders relaxed.
He even chuckled. Deal, he said. Wouldn't dream of it. He was lying, of course. He was already deeply involved with Amelia from his office. But by making him explicitly agree to that rule, I had him. I had set the first trap. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. I was living a double life. To Mark, I was the newly converted, slightly awkward wife, exploring her freedom. I'd tell him I was going out for a drink with a friend, or to a late yoga class. He'd give me a patronizing pat on the back, a good for you, honey. He had no interest in the details. He was too busy with his own adventures. In reality, I wasn't going to yoga. I was going to the library. I was sitting in quiet cafes with my laptop and a burner phone. I was becoming a detective in my own life. I started with a deep dive into Mark's company. His entire life revolved around his job, his ambition. He was up for a huge promotion, a partnership at his prestigious management consulting firm. It was all he talked about. It was the culmination of his life's work. His boss, David Churn, was the man who would make the final decision. David was a legend at the firm. Quiet, brilliant, and utterly ruthless, when it came to business. Mark worshipped him and feared him in equal measure. I started researching David. I read every article, every interview. I learned he was a widower, that his wife had passed away from cancer a few years prior. I learned he was a patron of the arts, specifically modern sculpture, a passion of mine that Mark had always dismissed as frivolous. I learned his firm was trying to land a massive new client, a sustainable tech company, but they were struggling to align with the client's ethos. I found my opening. It was a long shot, a crazy, desperate gamble. But all my other options were gone. The life I knew was already a pile of rubble. What did I have to lose? I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a character in a movie. The woman meticulously highlighting articles and drawing flowcharts on a whiteboard in her secret home office didn't feel like me. The real me was buried somewhere deep inside, grieving and broken. This new woman, this strategist, was a shell, armor I had built around the pain. But with each piece of information I gathered, the armor got stronger. I was no longer just reacting to Mark's cruelty. I was building something. I was forging a weapon. And I was going to aim it right at the heart of the only thing he truly loved, his ambition. The turning point came with a single email. I spent a week crafting it, every word chosen with surgical precision. It was an email to David Churn. Not from Chloe, Mark's wife, but from Chloe Reed, my maiden name, with a new email address and a link to a bare-bones professional portfolio I had built overnight, showcasing the freelance art journalism and marketing work I'd done years ago. I didn't mention Mark. I didn't mention our connection. I approached him as a complete stranger, a professional. In the email, I outlined a specific, actionable marketing strategy for his firm to win over the sustainable tech client. I used my art history background, my understanding of aesthetics and storytelling. I argued that they weren't just selling consulting services. They needed to sell a vision. I talked about the visual language of sustainability, the narrative of disruption, the art of corporate responsibility. I attached a 10-page proposal, complete with mock-ups and a communication plan. It was the best work I had ever done. It was fueled by a decade of suppressed creativity and a 6-month supply of pure, unadulterated rage. I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I waited. For 3 days, there was nothing. I started to despair. It was a stupid idea. He was a titan of industry. He probably had an assistant who deleted emails like mine before he ever saw them. I was a fool for thinking I could even get his attention. Mark was particularly smug during those 3 days. He was in the final round of interviews for the partnership. He would swan around the house, talking about his vision for the firm's future, practicing his power poses in the mirror. He treated me with a sort of benevolent detachment, like a king granting a brief audience to a court jester. Maybe you should get a little job, he suggested one night, magnanimously. Something to give you a sense of purpose. A little bookstore or a flower shop. Something you can handle. The condescension was so thick, I could have choked on it. I just smiled my serene, empty smile. Maybe, I said. Then, on the 4th day, I got a reply. It was from David Churn himself. The email was short, direct. MS Reed. This is impressive. I've never seen our brand analyzed this way. Are you free to meet tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I felt a jolt, a shock of pure, unadulterated power. It was working.
He had seen me.
Not as a wife, not as an accessory, but as a mind. I wrote back, confirming the time. That night, I told Mark I was meeting an old college friend for brunch. He barely looked up from his iPad. Great. Have fun. The next morning, I walked into the gleaming, intimidating lobby of Mark's firm. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. I felt like an imposter, a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. But then I remembered Mark's face, his words, something you can handle, and the fear solidified back into resolve. David's office was on the top floor, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city. He stood up when I walked in and shook my hand firmly. He wasn't what I expected. He was less intense than in his photos, with a quiet, observant energy. Your proposal was disruptive, he said, getting straight to business. You pointed out a flaw in our thinking that no one here has been able to see, We talked for 2 hours. I laid out my vision. I spoke with a passion and clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was alive again. The old Chloe, the one who dreamed of curating galleries, was back. But she was different now. Sharper. More focused. David listened intently, asking probing, intelligent questions. He didn't patronize me. He challenged me. He treated me like a peer. At the end of the meeting, he leaned back in his chair, looking at me with a new expression.
It was respect.
I want to hire you, he said. As a consultant. I want you to lead the pitch for the Keystone Tech account. He named a figure. It was more money than I had ever made in my life. It was a number that screamed value, that screamed respect. There's just one thing, he added, his eyes narrowing slightly. Your last name is Reed. But your address on the invoice you sent, it's the same as my top candidate for partnership, Mark Peterson. Any relation? The moment of truth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked him straight in the eye. He's my husband, I said, my voice steady. David's face remained impassive, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Understanding. But for the purposes of this project, I continued, I would prefer to be evaluated on my own merits. I am Chloe Reed. This has nothing to do with him. He held my gaze for a long moment, a silent assessment. Then he nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture. Agreed, Ms. Reed. Welcome to the team. I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. The game had been set in motion. Mark was so focused on the finish line, he had no idea I was on the track right next to him, running a completely different race. A race he didn't even know he was in. And I was about to lap him. The weeks leading up to our anniversary party were a blur of clandestine work and careful deception. I became a master of compartmentalization. At home, I was the dutiful if slightly distant wife. I listened to Mark's endless monologues about his impending partnership.
He was so close, he said.
David was being unusually tough on him, grilling him on details, but Mark was confident. He's just testing me, he'd say with a cocksure grin. Making sure I'm ready for the big leagues. Oh, he was being tested, all right. But not in the way he thought. By day, I was Chloe Reed, strategic consultant. I had a temporary badge that got me into the office building. I worked from a small, empty office on a different floor from Mark's team, a ghost in the machine. I met with David and a small, hand-picked team. We worked relentlessly on the Keystone Tech pitch. I poured everything I had into it. My creativity, my strategic mind, my anger. The anger was the most potent fuel of all. Every time Mark treated me with condescending affection, every time he came home smelling of Amelia's perfume, I would channel that rage into another slide of the presentation, another line of the pitch. I was building a monument to his betrayal. David was an incredible person to work with. He was demanding but fair. He saw my value from day one and never once made me feel like anything less than an equal. We developed a rapport, a professional intimacy built on mutual respect and a shared goal. We had lunch in the cafeteria. We had late-night coffee as we worked toward our deadline. We talked about business, about art, about life. He spoke of his late wife with a quiet, profound sadness that made my own manufactured marital bliss feel cheap and hollow. He never once crossed a line. Our relationship was purely professional, but there was a connection, an understanding. He saw me, the real me. 2 weeks before the party, we landed the client. Keystone Tech signed the biggest contract in the firm's history. It was a massive, game-changing win. The office was buzzing. David called me into his office and closed the door. You did this, Chloe, he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. This was your vision. We did it. I corrected. It was a team effort, he smiled. I'm creating a new position, he said. Senior Vice President of Strategic Communications. A partner-level role. I want you to have it. I was stunned into silence. A partner. The very thing Mark had been working towards his entire life. The thing he was so sure was his destiny. David was offering it to me. The official announcement will be made in a few weeks, he continued. But the partners will be informed at the end of this week. That includes Mark. He's not getting the promotion he was expecting. Frankly, Your work has shown me he lacks the vision we need for the future. I felt a dizzying mix of elation and terror. It was happening. It was real. There's one more thing, I said, my voice quiet. Our 10th anniversary party is in 2 weeks. Mark is hosting it at our house. All the partners will be there. He thinks it's a celebration of his impending promotion. A slow smile spread across David's face. He finally understood the full picture. He saw the chessboard I had laid out. He asked for an open marriage, I said, the words tasting like ash. He thinks I'm bringing a date to make him jealous. David leaned forward, his eyes glinting with something that looked a lot like righteous fire. Well, he said, we can't have you showing up alone, can we? I think my schedule just opened up. The plan was set. The trap was laid. All I had to do was wait for him to walk into it. The night of the party, as I was getting ready, Mark came into the bedroom. He was already dressed, looking smug and handsome in his tailored suit. He watched me put on my earrings. So, are you really bringing someone tonight? He asked, a teasing, condescending tone in his voice. Don't do anything to embarrass me, Chloe. David's going to be here. It's a big night for me. I looked at his reflection in the mirror. Don't worry, I said, my voice as smooth as silk. I promise you, it's going to be a night you'll never forget. The silence after Mark's scream is the loudest thing I've ever heard. It's a vacuum, sucking all the air and polite chatter out of the room. The shattered champagne glass lies at his feet, like a fallen crown. His face, just moments ago so full of smug triumph, is a mask of pale, doughy shock. His mouth is hanging open. His eyes are wide, darting from me to David and back again, unable to compute what he's seeing. David, to his credit, doesn't flinch. He simply inclines his head slightly. Mark, he says, his voice perfectly level, carrying easily in the dead quiet. Good to see you. This seems to break the spell. Mark stumbles back a step, his hand coming up to his chest as if to make sure his heart is still there. David? What are you doing here? With her? The her is laced with so much venom it could kill. He's looking at me now, his eyes filled with a furious, dawning betrayal. The irony is so thick, so rich, I can almost taste it. He's furious that I've betrayed him in a way he can't even comprehend yet, after he demanded the right to betray me every single day. Chloe invited me, David says simply, his hand resting lightly, professionally on my arm. It's a gesture of solidarity, not intimacy, but to Mark, it's a declaration of war. A few of the other partners from the firm, who had been clustered by the bar, start to drift over, drawn by the drama. They look confused. They know David. They know me as Mark's quiet, unassuming wife. The two of us, together, is a combination that makes no sense. We were just finalizing some details on the Keystone Tech account, David continues, his voice casual, but every word is a perfectly aimed dart. Mark's face goes from white to a blotchy, furious red. The Keystone account. The win that was supposed to cement his partnership. What does she have to do with Keystone? Mark sputters, pointing a trembling finger at me. He can't even say my name. I am just she, the woman who handles the life admin. David looks at me, a silent question in his eyes. He's letting me run this. It's my moment. I finally speak, my voice clear and cold. I was the lead strategist on the pitch. Mark, the words land like stones in a quiet pond. Ripples of shock spread through the small group of onlookers. I can see the other partners exchanging glances. I can see their wives looking at me with a new expression, not pity, but a dawning, shocked respect. You what? Mark chokes out. He looks like he's been punched in the gut. That's not possible. You write about pottery, the condescension is still there, a reflex even in his panic. It's the last shovel of dirt he will ever throw on my dreams. I do a lot of things you don't know about, I say, my voice dropping lower. That was your mistake. You didn't see me. You saw a comfortable life support system. You saw a housekeeper and an administrator. You never saw your partner. David decides it's time to deliver the final blow. He steps forward slightly, commanding the attention of the partners who have now all gathered around. As you all know, he begins, his voice taking on the formal tone of a boardroom announcement, We've been looking to fill the open partnership role. Mark was a strong contender, he pauses, letting the words hang in the air. Mark actually straightens up, a flicker of insane, desperate hope in his eyes. He still thinks he can win. However, David continues, the Keystone win has changed the landscape. It has shown us that our future isn't just in refining old models, but in creating entirely new narratives. We need a different kind of vision. He turns and looks directly at me. Which is why I'm thrilled to announce that the board has unanimously approved the creation of a new, partner-level position. Senior Vice President of Strategic Communications. And we have offered that role to the architect of the Keystone victory, Ms. Chloe Reed. The name, my maiden name, is the final twist of the knife. It's a public declaration of my independence. There is a collective gasp from the small crowd. Mark makes a sound, a strangled, guttural noise, like an animal caught in a trap. His eyes are locked on me, filled with a horrified, incandescent rage. He finally sees it. He sees the whole picture. The open marriage he demanded. The freedom he gave me. The way I used that freedom not to have some pathetic, meaningless affair but to dismantle his entire world, piece by piece, right under his nose. He thought he was playing chess, but I was playing a different game entirely, on a board he didn't even know existed. He didn't just lose his promotion. He didn't just lose his wife. He lost to me. And that, I can see in his eyes, is the thing he will never, ever forgive. The perfect setup has just imploded, and he is standing at the very center of the blast. The party died a quick, awkward death. People mumbled their congratulations to me and their hasty goodbyes to Mark, practically tripping over themselves to escape the toxic fallout. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty, save for the three of us. Me, my husband, and my new boss. David turned to me, his expression unreadable. I should go. We'll talk on Monday, partner. He shook my hand, gave a curt nod to the sputtering, shell-shocked man by the fireplace, and let himself out. The click of the door shutting was like a starting pistol. The moment it was just the two of us, Mark's shock erupted into pure, volcanic rage. You snake, he screamed, his voice cracking. You went behind my back. You slept with him, didn't you? You slept with my boss to steal my job. He lunged toward me, his face contorted with fury, and for a second, I thought he might actually hit me. But I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, my heart cold and steady in my chest. No, Mark, I said calmly. That's what you would do. That's what you did, with Amelia. You think everything is about sex because that's all you have to offer. I didn't sleep with him. I worked with him. I earned it. I walked over to my desk in the corner of the living room and picked up a thick manila folder. I'd been preparing it for weeks. I tossed it onto the coffee table between us. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. What's this? He snarled. This, I said, is your perfect setup. In writing, he opened it. Inside were printouts of his emails with Amelia, screenshots of his dating profiles, copies of the credit card statements with the hotel charges highlighted, the receipt for the champagne and lobster, and on top, a printout of the Q3 projections folder with the picture of him and Amelia in Paris. He stared at it, his rage slowly deflating, replaced by a sick, gray dread. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked small, pathetic. You wanted an open marriage, Mark, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. You told me to go out and find my own adventure. This is it. This is my adventure. You gave me the freedom and I used it, just not in the way you expected. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked fear. Chloe, please. We can fix this. I'll end it with Amelia. We can go back to how it was, and that was the saddest part of all. He still didn't get it. He thought how it was something worth saving. He thought the cage he'd built for me was a paradise I'd be desperate to return to. There is no us anymore, Mark, I said softly. There's just you. And there's me. And I'm filing for divorce in the morning. My lawyer will be in touch about selling the house. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him there amidst the wreckage of his life, staring at the proof of his own monumental stupidity. I went upstairs to the guest room. a room I hadn't slept in before, and I locked the door.
I didn't cry.
I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. The war was over. I had won. But winning had cost me everything I thought I ever wanted. It had cost me the boy who wrote my name on a foggy window, the man I promised to love forever.
It had cost me 10 years of my life.
But as I stood there, looking at my own reflection in the dark window, I realized that wasn't true. I hadn't lost. I had traded a life that was slowly killing me for a chance at a real one. I had lost a husband, but I had found myself. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that felt like a fair trade. The woman in the reflection was a stranger, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was going to like getting to know her. Losing a life you built is a specific kind of grief. It's like a phantom limb. You can still feel it there, even after it's been amputated. There are days when I walk into my new, smaller apartment and for a split second, I expect to smell Mark's coffee or see his jacket thrown over a chair. The ghost of that life still lingers. But it's fading. I'm a partner at the firm now. I have a corner office with a view that's all my own. I work hard, harder than I ever have, but it's a different kind of work. It's for me. My name is on the door. My vision is on the whiteboard. My voice is heard in the boardroom. Mark quit a week after the party. I heard he couldn't stand the humiliation, the looks from the other partners, the whispers in the hallway. He moved to another city, took a lesser job. Amelia didn't go with him. The divorce was surprisingly clean. He was too broken to fight. He just signed the papers. Sometimes, I feel a pang of something that might be sadness for him, for the man he could have been if his ambition hadn't curdled into arrogance. But then I remember his voice in that video, dripping with condescension as he called me his perfect setup, and the feeling passes. He didn't just underestimate me, he erased me. And you can't mourn someone who never truly saw you to begin with. The greatest irony is that he was right about one thing. The open marriage did set me free. It was the crisis I needed to remember who I was. It forced me to build my own lifeboat instead of waiting for him to save me from the storm he created. From the ashes of that beige, comfortable life, I built something stronger, something real, something that is entirely mine. If this story hit close to home, or if you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Thanks for being here with me. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.